Hi everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela, I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland, and this is podcast episode number 5. It's been about 3 weeks since I last recorded, so I have a few finished objects and some new whips that I'm really excited to talk about. So let's get into it. So very briefly, I'm just going to mention what I'm wearing. This is the Peacock Tee by Lena Holma Samsu. I used Sanda's Garn Lena in the colour Pearl Grey for mine, and I actually finished it in time for the last episode, so I talked about it more there. So I won't talk about it too much right now. If you're interested, I'll leave a link to that video in the description box, and I'll also leave a link to the Ravelry project page for this top. My first finished object is one that I actually don't have with me because it was a gift, but I'll pop a photo up. It's the striped baby cardigan that I was making for a friend. I wanted to make this for a 6-month-old baby, so I used a combination of 2 free patterns for this, which wasn't my initial intention. So I started using Drop's Little Bee cardigan, which is just a very plain raglan stockinette cardigan. It uses a sport weight yarn, so I started making it on the suggested yarn weight and needles, which were 3mm needles. I figured if I was off gauge by 1 or 2 stitches that it wouldn't really matter because it would fit the baby at some point, so I wasn't really too fussed about, gauge swatching. I didn't do a gauge swatch, I just started knitting. But as soon as I finished the yoke, I realised that I was actually off by about 6 stitches, and that was probably too much of a difference to be comfortable with. I wasn't sure if it would fit any size if I just kept knitting it. So I decided to search Ravelry for patterns that used the gauge that I had. So I think the Drops pattern was 22 or 23 stitches in 10 centimeters, and I was getting about 28 or 29. So I searched Ravelry for projects that matched that gauge, and I came across a pattern by Filcolana, which is the Lilla Crispin cardigan. It is an all over textured pattern, but I was easily able to swap out the texture for stockinette. I actually checked the cast on stitches for that pattern, and it was very, very close to the number of stitches that I had cast on to follow the Little Bee cardigan. So I figured I could just switch over to following the Filcolana pattern to tell me how deep to make the yoke and how many stitches to distribute across the sleeves and body when I split. And that worked out really, really well. I also really like that Filcolana textured pattern, so I'm definitely going to keep it in the library for future baby cardigans. For the main colour, I used Hobby Friends Extra Fine Merino in the colour Cream, and the contrast colour was Happy Sheep Baby Wool in the colour Cedar. Both are marked as a sport weight yarn, but I felt like they knitted up very, very close to a fingering weight. On 3mm needles at a 28 to 30 stitch gauge, I felt like that was close to a fingering weight for me. I used approximately 80 grams of the main colour and 20 grams of the contrast colour, and the stripes are 4 rounds each in between 8 rounds of the main colour. The only thing that I would do differently if I did this again is the button band. So when I started following the Drops pattern, it had a fully integrated garter stitch button band, which I wasn't too keen on, but I'd never made a cardigan before, and if I was going to do like a 1x1 rib button band, which is what I would have preferred, I think I needed a pattern to like hold my hand to do that. So I just decided to stick to the pattern, and I figured by the time I made another baby cardigan, I would have maybe done like a cardigan with a button band, and that's something I could integrate then. But for now I just decided to stick to the garter stitch. But actually the Filcolana pattern had a 1x1 ribbed button band, so that would have been perfect. And I don't know why that pattern didn't show up in my initial search for free baby cardigans, but I know for next time. Since the last episode, the only thing that's new are the buttons. So these are just 15mm buttons that I got in my local yarn shop. They were only like 10 cents each, and even when I was paying, the woman at the till was surprised at how cheap they were, and she said that they were probably there since the shop opened, which was, I don't know, like 10 years ago or something. So yeah, that was a bargain, and they had loads of them, so I was kind of thinking at the time maybe I should pick up more, but yeah, I decided I'll just leave it and I'll come back and get them if I need them in the future. My next finished object is a pair of socks that I made to match the cardigan, so I also don't have those. They are the Stretchy Baby Sock pattern by Fabian Schulte, and I use the same yarn, so the Hobby Friends Extra Fine Merino in the colour Cream and the Happy Sheep Baby Wool in the colour Cedar. A very simple 2x2 rib sock with a short row heel. It's a free pattern, and again I did 4 rows of stripes, 4 rows of contrast colour for the stripes. So I was actually really inspired by my own summer camp socks that I made recently. So I wanted to do a similar kind of stripe pattern. For these socks I used about 3 grams of the contrast colour and 20 grams of the main colour. The only modification I did was to swap the wrap and turns in the heel for German short row turns, which I followed a Nimble Needles tutorial for. And similarly to the cardigan, I made these for a 6-month-old baby. I personally think they look huge, but I don't know what size baby's feet are, but I looked up a chart online and it said that 6-month-old feet are like 4.25 inches, I think, or 4.5 inches, and these are about that. So I think they'll be okay, and even if they're not, they'll fit at some point, I suppose. So I really, really loved this set. The friend that I gave it to loved it as well. I think the cardigan turned out so nice. It blocked really nicely. I think it looks quite professional. I'm really, really pleased with it. And I would love to make more baby cardigans. I think making small items like that is nice because you have the freedom to kind of experiment with different colours or patterns without committing to the time sink of a full-sized adult cardigan, which is really nice. So yeah, I definitely see a lot more baby cardigans in my future. My last finished object is one that I actually do have with me, and it is a pair of socks. These are the Maurice Socks by Twin Set and Pearl. So these were still a whip in my last episode. I can't remember where I was with them. I think I had maybe done a heel or had just reached the heel on them. The pattern just has this lace motif running down the front and the back of the sock with a slip stitch heel. The yarn is from the Camel's yarn and it's a sock set. The colour is called Parma Violet. And the main colour is this kind of light purple, almost leaning towards pink, I think, with speckles of dark purple and occasional blue speckles in it as well, which I didn't notice in the skein, but once you start knitting it, you see more of these speckles. And the contrast colour is a dark purple that matches the speckles. I can't remember the exact composition of this, but I'm fairly certain it's a BFL nylon, like 80-20 mix or something. I don't have a lot of BFL socks. I don't know if I have any other BFL socks, but I really, really like this yarn. It just knitted up really nicely. Definitely want to get more from the Camel's yarn. They're based in Cornwall, I think, in the UK. I know their yarn is inspired by Cornwall, but I don't know if they're actually based in Cornwall. But yeah, they have some really, really lovely colours, and I'm looking forward to getting more from them in the future. So the main point of interest with these socks, for me anyway, was the fact that I used 9-inch circulars, which was my first time doing so. I usually do my socks 2 at a time on magic loop, which I've talked about before, so this was definitely a big change, but it didn't take me too long to get used to. I did still work them 2 at a time by switching over, so I would work like 20 rounds on one sock, then switch them over and work 20 rounds on the other sock. So that was a little bit frustrating because I constantly had to have one spare needle that I could keep the sock that I wasn't working on hold, and then be able to have another needle to transfer the working sock to that one to be able to work the second sock back to the working needle, if that makes sense. So I had to have like 3 pairs of needles on the go at all time. So that was a little bit like, it was just a bit of a handful, but I didn't mind it too much. The strange thing is that these socks are a good bit tighter than other socks that I've knitted recently, which is actually a good thing because I've noticed lately that my socks have been getting just a little bit looser, and I don't particularly like it. I like when my socks feel really tight. My gauge hasn't changed that I can see, so I've counted my stitches in my recent socks that I've made, and it's the same as in, you know, the earlier socks that I might have made. But I don't know if maybe it's like, instead of 9 stitches per inch, which is what it used to be, maybe it's gone down to like 8.9 stitches per inch or something, and you know, it doesn't make that much of a difference in an inch, but when you have 64 stitches in the round, maybe it makes a difference. I don't know, they just feel a good bit looser these days, my socks, especially around the ankle. They tend to kind of bunch up, but if I make them any tighter, I can't get them around my heel. So yeah, it's a bit of a dilemma, but these fit really, really nicely, and I don't know if it's because of the needle or because of the lace pattern, so I'll have to make a stockinette pair and see if they feel the same. The main benefit for me of using the 9-inch circulars was the elimination of ladders. So I used to get ladders really, really badly on my magic loop, to the point where I actually just gave up trying to solve it. I just accepted that ladders were a part of my socks, but I don't have any with these, which is amazing. I'm so happy with how they look. Possibly the neatest pair of socks I've ever made. They look really professional, I think. I'm really happy with them. There's also no holes where the slip stitch heel is, so I usually get holes just at the top of the gusset decreases, but I don't have any now, which is great. It's really, really great. I'm so happy with how these turned out. Definitely see 9-inch circulars being a common part of my sock knitting. I'll probably get a second pair at one point so I can actually do 2 at a time without having to swap socks around different needles. In the last video I mentioned that I didn't have much knitting time during the week, and when I did have knitting time I didn't really want to work on something that was mentally demanding. And I think with these socks, because I was using 9-inch circulars and because it was a lace pattern, it was a little bit mentally demanding, and I just didn't really have the headspace for it. Even when I got used to the lace, even when I got used to the 9-inch circulars, I wanted to really zone out and not have to think about my yarn overs or my decreases. So I didn't work on these a lot during evenings, so I kind of got most of the work done on these on weekends. I still loved it. I loved working the pattern. The lace pattern is really, really intuitive. I only did a few repeats before I was able to kind of memorize or predict what was coming next. If you can hear a bunch of kids, there's a playground near my house, and it's a lovely day out, so they're obviously having a great time, but I do apologise about the noise if you can hear it. Hello, Editing Michaela here. I'm just watching this back and laughing at myself, saying I don't know if you can hear the kids. Obviously I didn't realise how well my camera would pick up the sound. They're very loud, of course you can hear it. So all I can do is apologise, and maybe I could try record next time when the kids aren't out there, but with the summer coming in it's kind of difficult. So I know it's a little bit annoying, so I am very sorry. So that's all my finished objects for today, which I don't feel is very exciting, but I'm happy I have those things off the needles, and I've got some really exciting new cast-ons since the last episode that I'm looking forward to talking about. My first whip is one that I talked about in the last episode but I hadn't yet cast on, and just a disclaimer that there's a lot of needle stoppers on this project and the needles are still attached, so there's probably going to be a bit of clanking and banging around. I'm sorry about the noise. But this is my Vertices Unite shawl by Stephen West. I'm trying to get the whole thing in. I'll insert some like B-roll footage so you can actually see the full thing. So there's 2 sizes of this shawl. I'm making the smaller size. The yarn that I'm using is from Eru, which is an Irish brand, and it's a sport weight yarn with a mix of BFL and Romney. Although I don't know the exact percentages, I don't think it's on the label. They recently added these 5 new colours to their collection and I won them in an Instagram giveaway, so I was delighted with that. So happy. It's also such a generous prize. 5 skeins of yarn is a lot, so I am so grateful to have won that and to be able to work this beautiful shawl. I'm absolutely loving this project. These new colours are inspired by the kingfisher bird, so there's this orange colour, there's a tan, there's this royal blue, and then there's these 2 turquoise shades, but one of them is a little bit lighter and also has some Donegal tweed flecks in it. And the tweed flecks are actually shades of orange and yellow, so it blends in really nicely with the orange colour in the collection, which I think is really, really nice. So in the last video I talked about how excited I was to start this. I said I was going to cast on as soon as I stopped filming, and I did. I have not been able to put this down. So I obviously just talked about this with the socks, that I didn't want to work on something mentally demanding and I needed a mindless project. So I haven't been able to put this down. It's the perfect amount of mindless but also just a little bit of challenge with the modular joining, the increasing, the decreasing, like something to keep me interested, but still with the garter stitch I can just switch off completely. So I started with this orange and tan section here, then you move on to this section down here, which is the blue and like the light turquoise, the medium turquoise colour. Then you add this big rectangle, which is this light turquoise colour, and then you add the blue again, the royal blue. Then it's on to section 5, which is this turquoise and tan section for me, and then finally section 6 is just plain orange. And this was a very addictive knit, so every time I kept wanting to finish a section so that I could add another colour. Even after I had added all 5 colours, I found myself really looking forward to starting section 5 so I could add the tan back in again, because at that point I had done so much blue and I was really looking forward to seeing how the tan would balance the blue back out. I really haven't been able to put this down. I don't bring it out with me, so like whenever I'm at home and I'm knitting, this is what I'm working on. I never saw myself as a shawl knitter, but I see a lot more in my future. The fact that I didn't have to gauge swatch for this, I just picked it up, dove in. I've never done this kind of modular joining before, so I've learned a lot of new techniques with this as well. There's been so many benefits to this pattern, and I'm so happy that I started it and it came at just the right time. I think if you like the Sophie scarf but you have already knitted a lot of them, or else you're just looking for something a little bit more challenging, I think this is perfect. I know it's, you know, garter stitch shawl, so it kind of seems obvious, but I really do think that there's so much excitement with this pattern because of the potential colour combinations that you can do. I've already decided that I probably will make another one in the future with maybe some like leftovers of sock yarns and things that I have. In the size small, the colour that uses the most yarn, which is the orange for me, uses just under 150 meters. So it's perfect for a 50 gram skein of sport weight yarn. And in the last episode, obviously I haven't cast this on, but as you can see, I have nearly finished this last section, section 6, and then I'll have to do an I-cord border the whole way around. I do think the I-cord border will be a bit of a slog, but I don't really mind. I actually don't mind knitting I-cords. I know a lot of people hate it. I find that I can kind of just, I don't know, work through my muscle memory and I don't really think about it too much, and then it's over before I know it, so I don't really mind it. And I'm kind of determined just to get through it and get this off the needles. The yarn is definitely a rustic yarn. It's quite toothy, and it's also, the two strands are loosely twisted, so it feels very lightweight. It really does feel like it came straight from a sheep, and even when I was winding it up before I put it on the Swift, I like snapped the skein a few times and I just got a really strong smell of farm, which I like, but it's not for everyone. If you like your really soft merino wools, this is not that. Although I do think it's going to block out really nicely. I think it will soften up a lot when blocking. Even my dog was really curious about this. Like, he usually thinks yarn is a toy for him and he'll try and, you know, run off with it. But when I was knitting this, he came up and he just started sniffing it, and he was obviously very focused on it, and I think he was just a bit curious as to why he was getting a sudden instinct to herd the yarn. So yeah, I think I'm going to have this finished by the next episode, and I can't wait to show it. My next whip is a stash busting project, which I talked about in my spring stash busting video, and it is the Kuutar top by Sari Nordland. This is a halter style top, I guess, with like a high neck and lace paneling on the front and back. The yarn that I'm using is Hobby Rainbow Cotton 84 in dark brown. It's just a fingering weight 100% cotton yarn. This is definitely one of the oldest yarns in my stash. I bought this in 2021. I don't know why I bought so much of it. I very rarely bought a large quantity of yarn like this unless I had an immediate plan for it at the time. So I'm not sure why I bought this, but it's been sitting in my stash for a long time and I'm just really excited to get rid of it. So the pattern suggests 3.5mm needles for the lace and 3mm for the stockinette, but I got gauge on 3mm for the stockinette, which means I'm going to use 2.5mm for the lace. Does that make sense? The larger needle is for the stockinette. So I have almost finished one lace panel. I have a lifeline in, which I've tied at the back, so I can't fully stretch out the lace panel. I suppose it's close. I've got about 10 rows left to do on this, and I will explain why I have a lifeline in a minute. But yeah, I have nearly finished this panel, and then you work an identical panel for the back, and then you join under the arms to work the rest of the top and the round. There are a few things that I've learned from other people's Ravelry projects for this pattern. The first thing is that a lot of people say that the armhole is too deep. So the pattern tells you to work a few rounds of stockinette after the lace panels before joining in the round. Most people, well not most people, a lot of people on Ravelry say to join straight away as soon as you finish the lace, so that's what I'm going to do. So that's a pretty straightforward modification, but the other one I'm not too sure about. So some people on Ravelry have also mentioned that the lace panel goes quite deep and is a little bit revealing, and I have seen that in some people's photos that it goes a little bit too deep for my personal preference anyway. So I wasn't really sure how best to deal with that. My thinking was that I could modify the bottom of the lace panel to make it less holy. So I knit to just before the last kind of motif, and then I put it on waste yarn and I blocked it. It didn't actually grow too much with blocking. I thought the lace would open up a bit. It did open up, but in terms of size I don't think it made that much of a difference. So I actually compared it to my peacock tee then, which I'm obviously wearing right now, because this has a lace yoke as well. This goes down maybe a little bit further than I am completely comfortable with, but it's not so much that I really care, to be honest. If I knew it was going to go down this far, I probably would have just left out a couple of rows of lace at the end, but it's really not that big a deal. I don't mind it. I still wear it. I feel comfortable wearing it. But anyway, I compared my front panel of my Kuutar top to the peacock tee, and it actually doesn't reach as far down as the lace panel on the peacock tee. Even accounting for the 10 rows that I had yet to put in, I didn't think it would reach as far down. So I was a little bit surprised at that, and I was also surprised at the fact that the holes in this are not as big as they look in other people's photos. And I did meet gauge on stockinette. Part of me feels like I am knitting it quite tight, and I think part of the reason is because I'm using these smaller circulars. These are 40 centimeters. They're also metal, and I feel like I'm making a bigger effort to keep everything tight because it feels slippier. I'm also going to, the 3mm needles that I'll be working the body with are wooden, so I know that will make a difference when I start knitting the body, but I'm happy to just go with it and see how it looks. Anyway, getting back to my lace dilemma. Basically, the fact that it didn't extend that far down and the fact that the holes weren't that big made me wonder if I needed to modify it at all, which kind of surprised me because I was kind of set on making some sort of modification to it, and now I was really wondering if I needed to. But I was also keeping in mind the fact that cotton under its own weight will stretch out and sag, which I've definitely had experience of in the past. The question is there enough weight in this top to make it sag? I don't know. So I had a bit of a dilemma about whether or not to modify it. Ultimately, I decided yes, to modify it. So I kept my waste yarn in. That's the green yarn. I used it as a lifeline in case I didn't like how my modifications worked. So I had about 10 rows left of the lace pattern, and basically what I decided to do was, on the wrong side rows where I would be knitting into the yarn overs, I decided to knit in through the back loop. That way there would still be a yarn over, there would still be a hole, I think. I haven't done it yet, so I don't know. But the hole would be smaller, and that might solve my problem. So that's what I'm going to do. As I said, I've got about 10 rows left on this. And then once I reach the end, I'll put it on scrap yarn and do another one of these panels for the back. And that brings me to my next point, which is that the front and back are knitted identically. So I was thinking that I could just knit one panel with the modification and one panel as the pattern instructs. And if I don't like the modification and if I don't like the modification, provided the lace panel doesn't extend too far down, it's not too revealing, I can just flip the top around and wear it on the other side. So I actually think that's what I might do. So yeah, I feel like I'm kind of just feeling around in the dark with this. I'm just going to keep knitting it and see how it turns out. I do really like the pattern. I don't mind the yarn. I know a lot of people don't like knitting with 100% cotton yarn. Wouldn't be my first choice, but since I have it there, I'm going to use it. This will be a big chunk of my stash gone, which is great. Really, really happy. If I can get this done, I will get it done. And I think the pattern's lovely. I'm really looking forward to wearing this. I just need to obviously sort out my thoughts on the lace panel. If you have any thoughts on what I should do, please let me know. I did think about doing other kinds of increases instead of the yarn overs for that last motif, but all the ones that I came across would shorten the fabric a bit because they would use yarn from the stitch below instead of like a make one left or make one right or something like that. My final whip is the Poppy Tee by Petite Knit. This is an all over stockinette tee, and I suppose the main detail is the way the shoulders are constructed, which I've heard being called European construction. I'm not sure if anyone can correct me on that. Basically, you cast on for the back, you do some rapid increases to form this seam here, you pick up from this seam to work the shoulders, then you join in the round while picking up stitches along the top of the shoulder for the sleeve. The pattern also has ribbed finishes, but I'm going to do folded hems, which I'm really excited about. I just want something a little bit more contemporary and modern. And I'm also going to do stripes just below the split, so in the body and the sleeves. The yarns I'm using is Knitting for Olive Cotton Merino. I originally bought Piglet for the main colour and Mole for the contrast colour. which are these two here. And I swatched on 3.5mm needles, which is what the pattern calls for. But the swatch, I got too many stitches in 10 centimeters. I think I got about 28 and the gauge is 23 in the pattern. And the fabric was also too loose and open for what I was going for. So then I swatched with 2 strands held together and I did get 23 stitches per 10 centimeters. And the fabric is definitely more what I was going for in terms of density. The issue was then that I didn't have enough yarn, so I had 1,000 meters essentially of a light fingering weight yarn. But what I needed was 1,000 meters of, I suppose this is like a sport weight, I guess, when you hold the 2 strands together. So I needed twice as much, and I thought, grand, I'll just buy more. Went on to Knitting for Olive website. They had just restocked their cotton merino, but there was no piglet, and there was no piglet, and mole was sold out. So piglet wasn't even listed and mole was listed as sold out. So I emailed them and I explained that I asked them if they had plans to restock piglet, and they confirmed my worst fears that it was discontinued. But they did suggest that I get the colour powder, which they said was very similar. So I decided to take a risk and I ordered 3 more balls of powder. And I didn't want to wait for mole to be restocked, so I actually got 2 balls of a different colour, the navy blue, which I think might be a new one. I think it's really, really lovely. And so they arrived, and piglet and powder are actually very similar. I'll show you. So piglet is the warmer, kind of more saturated colour, and powder is a little bit more cooler or desaturated or greyish, not greyish, it's desaturated I would say compared to piglet. Held together they look very, very similar. If you look really closely you can see some kind of marling effect, but I don't think it makes a big difference to the top, and I'm really, really happy with how it looks. You start in the back and you do these kind of rapid increases, and then you pick up for the shoulders. You do join the round quite early on, which is nice because I'm already, you know, you get into that kind of stockinette in the round very, very quickly, which is really nice. And then you do some raglan increases until you're ready to split for the body. So I'm almost at the point where I'm ready to split for the body and sleeves. I think I've got about 6 rounds left to do. And then I'm going to start adding in my stripes. I'm not sure yet how thick I want the stripes to be. I think I'm going to do 8 rounds of the main colour and 4 rounds of the navy. Obviously this colour is quite fleshy, so I think the navy will balance it out quite nicely. The only thing that I'm not sure of, and I would love an opinion on this, I did try this on with tried-on tubing, and I'm not worried about overall I think the navy will tone down the fleshiness of this and obviously add some contrast so it won't wash me out as much, but it is up here, it's just going to be this fleshy colour next to my face, and I'm not sure if I like it. I'm thinking when I add the neckline I could add 1 kind of row of navy just at the top of the collar to create a boundary between the top and my face. Sorry, I am looking in the viewfinder so I can see where I'm positioning this. So yeah, I'm not sure how that would look. I would love opinions. I think I'm going to do it anyway, and if I don't like it, that'll be very easy to frog. I'm just going to do like a folded collar, so I'll knit like, I don't know, a few rows in the beige, 1 row in the navy, back to the beige to do the back of the collar, sew it down, and I'll try it on then. And if I don't like it, I can just undo the collar and redo it. But I would love some opinions on that, or if anyone has any other ideas of what I could do to kind of separate this colour from the rest of my skin. So the pattern calls for 1,000 meters. I have 750 meters of the main colour and 250 of the contrast colour. Bear in mind that's 2 strands held together. So when I say 750 meters, I have a total 1500, but obviously if I'm holding it together, it's 1750 meters of sport weight instead of 1500 meters of fingering weight. I'm probably over explaining this. Anyway, that wasn't a very smart decision because it's unlikely I'm going to use exactly 250 of the contrast colour and exactly 750 of the main colour. In reality, I'm going to use less of the contrast colour, which means I'd need more of the main colour if I do end up using the full meterage that the pattern calls for. So I should have gotten even just 1 more ball of the main colour, would have been smart, but here we are. I've used 2 balls already, held double, of course, of my 6 main colour balls. I was actually getting worried when I was knitting the yoke and I could see how much was left in the ball. I didn't think I was going to get that much out of it, but I've nearly gotten the full yoke out of those 2 balls, so that kind of reassured me. I do think it will be okay. The sleeves are going to be quite short. It's only a few centimetres, the pattern says, so the sleeves won't take much yarn at all. And then the body, whatever length I knit it to, by the time I finish the yoke, it's nearly half that length already. So I think it's going to be okay. So I want to talk about some plans because I am really excited about my next cast on. So when I'm finished my Vertices Unite shawl, I am going to cast on the Sweet Shop blanket by Laura Penrose, which everyone and their mother made last year, and I'm about to jump on that bandwagon. And the yarn that I'm going to use is my Olivia and Oliver Fibres advent calendar, which I am so excited to finally use. This has been sitting in the original box since I opened it. I always knew I wanted to make a Sweet Shop blanket, but I was waiting to get the like the main colour to go with it. I did want to use Knitting for Olive Merino because I've never used it before, and I thought it would be nice to try it out, but I wanted to pick the colour in person, and there's no shops in Ireland that sell it, so I had to wait until I was in a shop abroad that sold it. So when I was on my interrailing trip back in April, I went into some yarn shops and I picked out a colour. It's a very basic colour, it's called Cloud. I kind of wanted almost a marzipan kind of colour, but not so strongly marzipan. I did have a look online and they have a colour called marzipan that I liked the look of online, and I was 99% sure I was going to get that one, but then when I saw it in person it was a little bit too grey, whereas I wanted something a little bit more warm toned. I know I sound like I'm being really fussy, but actually when I saw Cloud in person in the shop, it fit the bill perfectly. I really liked it, so I didn't buy it then because I didn't have room in my suitcase, but when I got home I ordered enough yarn to finish the blanket, and it arrived recently. And the reason I'm waiting for my Vertices Unite shawl to be finished is because I need that needle size for it. So that's what I'm going to do, and I wanted to show it on here before I started so that you could see all of the colours. I'm so excited. So this is actually a circular fade, which means that the first colour fades into the last colour, so you can start anywhere. And because of that, I'm actually going to start with the browns. Let's see if I can maneuver this. I'm going to start with the browns because I do find them a little bit stark in the middle of these like very light pinks and very light greens. I find that it just looks a bit jarring that it goes straight into these dark browns and back out to a lighter colour again. So I'm going to start with the browns and go towards these peaches, yellows, greens, back to the pinks, purples, and that'll be it. I also want to do small triangles, I think. So kind of like a Battenberg blanket, but obviously not crocheted. I want to make a Sweet Shop blanket. I'm going to make a triangle that weighs 3 grams to start off with and see how big it is. Because each of my mini skeins is 20 grams. So if I get triangles that are 3 grams, I'll get 6 triangles, which I think is a nice number. I also want to kind of scatter the colours but fade them at the same time. So I'm really thinking of Nitty Natty's Battenberg blanket because she did it with an advent calendar from last year, and I think she organised her colours so that it did fade, but it wasn't just like one row of one colour, next row is the other colour, like they kind of mixed in together but faded up through the blanket. So that's what I want to do, which I think I'm going to have to like sit down and, you know, actually plan out each triangle. And I also have 1 or 2 colours that aren't part of the advent but are scraps and need to be used, and they do blend in nicely, so I'm going to throw those in as well. I'm not like strictly about keeping this blanket strictly to this advent calendar. I'm happy to kind of throw in other colours if it means I can use up my scraps. So yeah, I'm so excited. I've been honestly dying to cast this on since Christmas, but I always knew that I wanted to pick my main colour, or my contrast colour, I don't know what we would call that. Yeah, I guess, I don't know, the cream. I knew I wanted to pick the cream in person, so I've been patiently waiting to cast this on, and I'm so excited. I think I will have cast it on by the next episode, so I'm excited to show you then. My next plan was kind of spontaneous. I only decided on it yesterday. I haven't even fully decided on it yet. I wanted to buy a cardigan for myself, and I knew I could knit one, but you know, we all do that thing where like we see something and say, oh, I could knit that, and you never do. So I was like, I'm not gonna say I'm gonna knit a cardigan, because I know it will take me a while to get around to it, and then by the time I finish it, it'll be ages away, and I kind of want one knit. So I went to buy one, couldn't find one, so I did in fact just settle on knitting one for myself. Part of the reason was because I had yarn already, so I bought yarn for an Elizabeth blouse back when I didn't know I didn't like the feeling of mohair against my skin. So this is Santa's Garn Tin Peer Gynt in the colour number 4672, and this is Vilcolana Tilia, and the colour number is 324, and they're both just this dark purple aubergine colour, I guess I would call it. Once I'd made a couple things with mohair in them, and I realised I don't like the feeling of mohair just straight against my skin. I don't mind it in like a cardigan or a jumper, but the Elizabeth blouse would be against my skin. I wouldn't wear something underneath it, so I decided maybe I could make it just with the strand of wool, but that would leave me with 6 balls of this that I wouldn't have plans for, didn't know what to make with. So yesterday when I was thinking about like maybe I could make a cardigan, I remembered I have these here and they would be lovely in a cardigan, I think. So then it was a matter of picking a pattern, and it came down to 2 options. One was the Cognac cardigan by Atelier Castin, and the other one is the Maggie cardigan by Petite Knit, but I wanted to make it long sleeved. The main difference between the 2 patterns is that the Cognac cardigan has a gauge of 16 stitches in 10 centimeters, whereas the Maggie cardigan has, I think, 23 stitches in 10 centimeters. I also thought that it would be nice to knit from a designer that I haven't knitted from yet, so I've obviously done a few Petite Knit patterns, and I am really open to trying new designers. I haven't done anything from Atelier Castin. I've heard really good things about the pattern. It's got video tutorials and things, I think, so yeah, that's a big plus for me, and also the fact that it is knitted on bigger needles, it's going to knit up faster. So I did a swatch. I first did 6mm needles like the pattern suggests, and my gauge was too loose, so I dropped down to 5mm needles. So on the bottom I have my 6mm swatch, and the top is on 5mm needles. And I hit gauge, and it is a little bit gapey, but it's not... I don't dislike it, but I probably would prefer tighter fabric. But then with a tighter fabric it might be too warm for a spring cardigan, or maybe it wouldn't. It doesn't get that warm here, so it might be okay. I'm really on the fence. I don't know what to do, to be honest. Another thing is that I have enough yarn for the Maggie cardigan. I have more than enough for the Cognac cardigan. If I make the Cognac cardigan, I'll have leftovers that I won't know what to do anything with. So yeah, those are my thoughts at the moment. I will probably swatch on 3.5mm needles for the Maggie cardigan and see what I think about the fabric. I am very undecided. This is very spontaneous of me. I didn't even have time to add this to my Ravelry queue. Like, even if usually if I have a spontaneous cast on, I'll at least add it to my Ravelry queue before I start knitting it, 2 or 3 days later. I literally just decided on this yesterday and swatched already, which is just very unlike me. But anyway, that is everything for today. I really enjoyed making this episode. I had a lot of exciting things to talk about. They're exciting to me anyway. If you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss an upload. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!